Many of us are looking for that elusive optimal diet to build muscle and lose weight. It's a big topic, and let's be honest, we're often tempted by whatever's trending, whether it's keto, low carb, or something else entirely. And as a sports nutritionist, people often ask me whether low carb diets are the best for building muscle, because they've seen claims that it helps to promote strength while stripping away body fat. But are these low carb diets actually superior for building muscle? Or are you better focusing on a more traditional diet? By the end of this episode, you'll know the key takeaways and what you should work on to ensure you're in the best position possible to build muscle. Hey, and welcome to Vegetarian Health and Longevity, a podcast by Hurry the Food Up, where I cover topics that help vegetarians live longer in better health. I'm your host, James LeBague. I'm a registered sport and exercise nutritionist and advanced clinical practitioner in family medicine. It's my pleasure to interview expert guests, share my own experiences from working with patients and clients, and demystify some of the nutrition fluff that's out there to give you practical, take-home information that you can use to live a healthier life. With a busy life, I want strategies that deliver results with less effort. I'm no stranger to hard work, and I have a good mindset when it comes to prioritizing the long term, even if it means I don't see as much progress in the short term. But if there's something that could help me get more benefit in a shorter time frame and is realistic, safe, and evidence-backed, I'd be a fool not to follow it. For years, high-carb diets have been the go-to recommendation for athletes. Carbohydrates play a key role in replenishing glycogen reserves in your muscles and liver, and this is crucial for sustaining high-intensity training, allowing you to perform at your best during workouts or competitions. Without adequate glycogen, it's almost impossible to train consistently at a high intensity, and when it comes to growing or building muscle, it's considered likely that you won't be able to lift as heavy or regularly as you would otherwise. However, not everyone agrees. Critics argue that high-carb diets may not be as effective for fat loss or strength gains as alternative approaches like low-carb, high-fat diets. Low-carb diets, including the ketogenic approaches, have gained significant traction in recent years. Advocates claim that cutting carbohydrates forces the body to burn fat for fuel, which can enhance fat loss. Some people also prefer it because it makes it easier to maintain a calorie deficit for them, because the more restricted approach lends itself to easier weight loss than if all foods were available. And proponents even suggest that low-carb diets optimize hormonal responses, such as improving insulin sensitivity and increasing the fat-burning potential. But this isn't the whole story. While low-carb diets might work well for certain individuals or specific goals, they come with notable drawbacks, especially for people looking to build muscle. One of the primary issues is glycogen depletion, which we've spoken about. Without adequate carbs, your glycogen stores empty. Without adequate carbs, your glycogen stores are much likelier to be on the lower side, which could hinder your ability to perform high-intensity or high-volume training. And this can lead to fatigue, reduced performance, and slower progress towards your goals. Now, let's move on to some evidence. A 2024 study called Effectiveness of High-Fat and High-Carbohydrate Diets on Body Composition and Maximal Strength After 15 Weeks of Resistance Training provides some fresh insight into this debate. The researchers recruited 48 men, averaging 25 years of age, and split them into two groups. One group followed a low-carb diet, consuming fewer than 10% of their daily energy from carbohydrates. The other group followed a high-carb diet, where carbs accounted for 70% of their daily caloric intake. Both groups engaged in the same structured resistance training program over a 15-week period, and their calorie intake was standardized. Now, both groups experienced fat loss, with the low-carb group showing slightly greater reductions in body fat on average. The high-carb group had increased their muscle strength, while the low-carb group saw a slight decline. These results are fascinating, and they need a bit of exploring. The researchers primarily measured body composition changes via bioelectrical impedance. While these tools can be useful, they're also very sensitive to changes in body water fluctuations. Low-carb diets are notorious for disrupting this. Because of the lack of glycogen that's stored, water is stored with glycogen, so when someone undertakes a low-carb diet, they typically lose a lot of weight quite quickly, and this is usually water weight. This is why people who swap onto keto diets typically see such dramatic losses at the start, but it's not fat loss and it's not sustainable. The researchers also used waist circumference as a tool to measure body composition changes, and they found that this was similar across both groups, and they both declined. The high-carb group made statistical improvements in their squat, deadlift, and bench press, suggesting that this diet was superior if improving muscle strength was the primary goal. These findings align with longer-term studies, which have generally shown that both low-carb and high-carb diets are effective for fat loss, with no significant differences when all else is equal. However, when it comes to performance, the evidence consistently favors higher carbohydrate intake, and it's hard to get around that. If you're trying to lose weight, by the way, you can check out a 3 weeks weight loss meal plan as part of the Vegetarian Protein Fix. We've made it easy for you to get started by providing a meal plan with recipes with step-by-step instructions and a grocery list. So all you have to do is buy the food and cook our easy but tasty recipes. We've worked out the macros so that you don't have to, so that you can focus on the things which I have no doubt are taking up your brain power. You can download this plan at hurrythefoodup.com/try, that's TRY, and get on it today. So what can we take away from this? For most people, particularly those who are active and aim to train at a high intensity, a high carb diet is likely the safer bet. Aiming for around 50% of your daily energy intake from carbohydrates is a good starting point. This should ensure your glycogen stores are topped up and ready to support consistent, high-quality training sessions. It's also crucial to maintain a high-protein diet, regardless of your carbohydrate intake. Research suggests that consuming 1.4 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day helps preserve and build muscle mass, as well as supporting recovery. For example, if you weigh 70 kilos, that would mean eating at least 100 grams of protein per day. Protein remains non-negotiable, whether your focus is on fat loss, muscle gain, or both. For those considering a low-carb approach, it's worth understanding the potential risks. While low-carb diets may lead to slightly greater fat loss in the short term, they could compromise muscle strength and performance. This trade-off might not matter if your primary goal is fat loss and you don't engage in high-intensity training. But if you want to build muscle or perform well in the gym, these risks become more significant. You also have to look at the long-term realities. Can you follow a low-carb diet for months at a time, or even forever? Most people I know who have tried this have found it very difficult due to the restrictive food choices, and is not something I would recommend to the average person because of the lack of research on the long-term safety of them. It's also important to acknowledge that there are successful athletes and coaches on both sides of the argument. Many endurance athletes swear by high-carb diets, and it's what I would recommend because high-carb diets are essential for endurance athletes, especially when aiming for peak performance during something like a race. On the other hand, some strength athletes and bodybuilders have found success with low-carb approaches, particularly when their training volume is lower or they're in a cutting phase. The key takeaway is that context matters. Your diet should align with your training demands and personal goals. If your workouts rely on sustained effort and intensity, carbohydrates are indispensable. If you're training less frequently and focusing purely on fat loss, a low-carb approach might work for you if you prefer that dietary pattern, but it won't lead to better results in the long term compared to a high-carb diet. Ultimately, there's no definitive answer yet as to whether low-carb diets are superior for building muscle. Both high-carb and low-carb approaches can help you lose weight, but when it comes to simultaneously losing fat and gaining muscle, high-carb diets seem to have the upper hand. They support better glycogen storage, training intensity and muscle strength, making them the better choice for most active individuals. The most important thing is to figure out what works for you. If you're unsure where to start, my recommendation would be to prioritize carbohydrates before and after training. Keep your protein intake high and adjust based on your performance and how you feel. Now, if you did find this useful, I would really appreciate it if you gave it a quick review on whatever platform you're listening on. It'll only take a moment, but it helps the podcast spread to more people. So these reviews really matter. So thanks for listening, and we'll speak soon.